Cool. You see me?
Yeah.
Cool.
We're going to start the podcast in the manner of old people everywhere. Can you see me? Is
Yeah.
this thing on? Oh.
I just got an error message. Like the second it counted down to 0. It's like it just told me your video is not accessible.
Well, it seems to be recording some sound.
Okay,
but,
good. So, well, we
it's doing a
can.
weird uploading thing.
I'll cut this part because I can.
Nice. We'll just leave it in for pure comedy value.
Yeah.
Howie, how are you?
All right, Glenn. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, just
good. We're going to pretend we haven't just had like a 30-minute really depressing conversation about the state of the world, right? And just sort of jump into something helpful here and useful and fun.
Yeah, it's always a fun thing when the question "How are you?" doesn't turn into "I'm fine, thanks," but a 30-minute diatribe about all the things that have gone wrong in the world and how we feel powerless to fix them right now.
Right.
That's
you know Ogden Nash, the poet.
Yeah,
like he had
of him. I haven't read a bunch of his work.
So he wrote like these really short poems. One of them was, "Don't tell them about your indigestion. How are you is a greeting, not a question."
Yeah. It's a funny thing though. That's one of the things I had to learn when I moved over here. That it really is just a greeting in America. Like literally, how you doing? How you doing? Like that's the response, is that you just ask a question back. You don't even say "I'm fine, thanks" and "How are you" in the way that we used to teach Japanese kids to say in English. But like, "How are you?" "I'm fine, thank you," and "How are you?" That's the way that everybody says it in Japan. And like, you would at least go in, you maybe deflect to the weather or something in England. You give some sort of response to that question before just throwing it back over the net. How are you? How are you? Who's going to crack first and actually express some real emotion? Not me. How are you? Well, it's been going. That's about how you can imagine. Well, it's going. Words like that. So it's been a weird for me, but now it's completely natural to me. People ask me how I'm doing. I do not feel compelled to tell them at all. I just throw it straight back over the net and.
Well, that's why I prefer the more evocative "How's it hanging?"
How's it hanging? Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
which at least brings up imagery.
Yeah, I come out with other things like Britishisms, like "What's cracking?" "What's occurring?" That's good. My uncle Paul used to say out in the building site all the time. He'd come in, "What? What's occurring?" I used to like that. That's quite a nice one. Which I suppose is the guess is same as "What's happening" technically, but it just it kind of makes you feel like you need to give somebody a little news report on what really has been occurring. And so it's got a nice kind of open question feel to it. It doesn't just shut people down. I think that's the problem, right? Like, "How you doing?" is literally asked as if it's a yes/no question, right? Here, I think it really is. There's no genuine request. There's no empathy implied by that question when you say "Hey," unless you say "How are you doing?" Right? How are you doing? Right? If you say "How are you doing?" there is absolutely no interest in that, right? It's an empty question. It is, but yeah, which is kind of sad in its way. I think. I don't know. Which is why sometimes I like to give a lengthy answer to people when they're expecting the yes, just to call their bluff and be like, "Well, now I'm going to tell you, and you've got no choice because you asked the question." Yeah. As a matter of fact, I've got this growth. Just launch into whatever you want at that point. But yeah, well, so that was a big opener to the "How are you doing?" anyway. But yeah, it's been a wee while since we got a podcast together. I think it's been a few months actually, and I'm receiving prods now from the Systema for Life listeners like, "Are you still doing this thing or what?" And since I went full time working for one company as a consultant in January, I've been somewhat pressed to balance out my responsibilities of teaching and training Systema, working for the man, and actually recording a podcast at the same time. But I'm hoping to jump back on the horse now. Now I'm through the kind of 3-month onboarding thing and get back to like a decent regular, maybe once a month podcasting schedule. But you seem to have been pretty relentless. You've been still keeping your podcast churning out.
I missed one about 3 weeks ago. The first week I've missed ever. And wow. I kind of sat with that for a while because I had the retreat going. I had two retreats in a single week. I know we saw each other there briefly, and it was like I could do something. Like I could just sit home and record something, or I could maybe call you and beg you to talk to me. And I was thinking like, what's the right thing for me to do here? Like, is it okay to skip a week? And it was a really interesting question.
Mm.
because on some level, like if I think it's okay to skip a week, I'll start skipping weeks all over the place. Like there's
Yeah, that actually ties in quite a lot with something that I've been thinking about just with regard to routines and attention, right?
hmm,
Just that people that I've known for years that are quite disciplined and laser focused and all that kind of stuff. Like the last couple of years, has really thrown them a curve, and it's been a combination of the obvious kind of just routines being thrown up under COVID and people working remotely all the time and being able not to put their pants on when they go to work for a couple of years, and now they're kind of being asked to again and kind of show up in weird hybrid remote ways. But there's also just the crazy onslaught of demands on our attention now, not just the attention engineers on social media who are trying to keep you stuck on it, and the media constantly reporting about the war in Ukraine and any number of other terrible things going on, and the uptick in political activity and whatever's going on. But there's also this, the attention economy has been around for a while, but there's something else happening now that I kind of like to call the focus economy. There are as many
hmm,
people now talking about ways that you can find your flow and become indistractable and find deep work in every day. It's like I'm getting distracted now by people blitzing me with adverts telling me how not to be distracted. it's,
yeah.
it's 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 kind of a crazy situation. There's like a deep irony floating around in there somewhere.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw the phrase productivity porn. I was like, "Oh my
Mm.
God, you have nailed me."
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's what it is, isn't it? Yeah, you can browse through that forever, thinking that you're actually working towards something, and you're not. You're just you're browsing some. It's analogous to like browsing through I know dietary supplements instead of actually getting exercise or going outside or changing the way that you eat. Right. Instead, you could browse through loads of ways. I wonder what kinds of shortcuts that I could take that
Hmm.
wouldn't involve me going through all the usual hoops in order to get done what I know needs to get done. It's the same thing with this. It's like I wonder how many of these productivity books and things that I could read rather than sit my ass down and do the friggin' thing. It's I don't think they really are though. I think they're preying on it now. I think there's a predatory productivity economy going on, which is kind of nuts. And some parts of me agree that it needs to be addressed in a way, and that we need to mount like a valiant defense against the onslaught of distractibility from social media and everything else that's going on. Part of me is like, yeah, I need to figure this out for myself and my kids to make sure that we're productive, focused people who have the concentration of a martial artist and stay on things until they get done. And perseverance needs to be something that people just live with all the time. And if we've lost that somehow over the last couple of years, we need to figure out a way of getting it back, right? There's one part of me that's doing that. And the other part of me is I don't want to become Tim Ferriss. I don't want to become some routine-driven asshole who's optimizing his life, every day. So there's nothing interesting about that to me, and even less about is interesting about that to my wife. I'm sure she'll be like, "All right, you're a terminal bore. Well done. You have six-pack abs, and you're getting up at 5 in the morning and crushing your day. But you're now no longer the person that I met, and I don't want to be married to you anymore." It's like there's something about that that's a bit unappealing to me as like be careful what you wish for because you might just get it. Do you know what I mean? If you instigate all of these routines and do all these things to optimize your life, you'll end up being a person that you didn't want to be. That's the
Hmm.
struggle that's playing out in the two hemispheres of my brain at the moment.
Yeah, I was thinking, I guess Tim Ferriss isn't going to be a guest on my podcast after I let that description go
Yeah, sorry, I've slagged him off.
unchallenged.
I probably just blitzed any chance for you to hit the New York Times top 10 with your new book now. It's not going to get
Yeah.
on there, but
But yeah,
that's what it
you're
takes.
it's funny. Like I see, I'm on a lot of lists and I follow, Twitter followers who like I am interested, and as I know you are too, in sort of, what we might vaguely call self-improvement or
Yeah,
self-aware, you know, use of resources to achieve important outcomes.
yeah,
And I keep seeing like people would like have a photograph of a bunch of books and they would say,
mm.
these 15 books you absolutely must read.
I've seen that.
And
Yeah.
I'm deeply ashamed that I've read most of them.
Mm.
you know, there's
Yeah,
like
there's a moment in there like, wow, am I that desperate to improve myself that I've read all of those books?
and some of them are great. Like essentialism is often on the list, and you
Yeah,
and I are both big fans of Greg McEwen, and
yeah,
and then there's other like Atomic Habits, or um, the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, stuff that I've
Yeah.
enjoyed. But then when
Yeah.
I see them all laid out on that list, I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, there's something, I don't know if it's sort of joyless or just desperate. Like, read one, if it's good, go do it, and
Yeah.
then have a life.
Yeah. Surely you shouldn't need 50 of them, right? If one of these has even half of the principles in it that you feel like you need, you shouldn't need to read 50 more, right? If they're doing what they say on the tin. I don't know. It's I think what it really does, it begs the question of, to what end? Do you know what I mean? Like, let's say that you're the most optimized, efficient person in the world, and you do get up at 5 a.m. and crush your workday, right? Um, to what end, right? Because a lot of the time, if you manifest that kind of efficiency and productivity, it's not like the work goes away. Whether you're trying to save the planet, or whether you're trying to make money, or you're trying to become an influencer of thought or action or something like that work is probably never done. I mean, maybe it is for people that are just money focused, and they have that metrics of like, I hit all my goals this month,
Oh,
right?
I don't know
I
anyone.
sold X number of
Yeah,
things.
I don't know anyone who's money
No,
focused who understands the word enough.
no, yeah, that's what I'm sort of saying. Like, but what I'm saying is that in principle, you could have a metric. You could be like, "Yeah, I made X $1,000 this month. That's all I need to make," right?
Yeah.
And in a way, as a freelance, as for a lot of years, that's kind of what I did. I'm like, okay, here's my nut. Here's what I need to pay my bills and support my family every month. And so once I've hit that amount, I would maybe go a bit over the top and then be like, okay, that's sufficient. I don't want to kill
Mhm.
myself making that much more money because I've got everything that I need to stick stuff away. But then, like you say, after a while, you're like, well, I'm not going to head the game here, and I have to save for retirement and do other things. And what about medical emergencies? And so there's even if you're not massively money motivated in the sense that you don't want to be rich or something like that, right? You can still be deeply safety motivated, right?
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, I can never make my family secure enough, right? I can never make my situation secure enough, so I have to keep working for the more money so that I can get more and more secure. And that's if you're mostly working just for that paycheck and the security that it provides, right? If you're working for a higher ideal, if you're working to try and change the world in some way, like to try and get everybody to eat plant-based and healthy, or if you're trying to get everybody to live a more examined life, or be less angry all the time, or be less stressed or something, I mean, that work is never done, right? It cannot be done, and it will not be done in your lifetime. So there's even less capacity for metric-based rationing of your time and effort, right? So the more productive and efficient you become, yeah, the more you might do, and the bigger the dent that you'll put in the world. And that's often like the pitch, I think, of this kind of work. It's just like, you won't believe how much more you can achieve if you do all this stuff. It's like, yeah, but to what end? It's like,
Well,
where's
yeah.
at what point do you feel like you've made such a big dent in the world that you feel that you can relax and spend time with your family, or that you do you know what I mean, or you can stop and smell the roses a little bit? Because I don't know that anybody really gets to the end of their life and looks back and says, I just wish I'd made a bigger dent. I wish I'd done more.
Yeah.
Maybe some people do. Maybe some people just really genuinely waste their lives and they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about it until now. But most people are content with the idea that they survived. Maybe they're annoyed that they were, wasted time not talking to people, or they wasted time bearing grudges or something. But mostly people are like, I wish I'd seen more. I wish I'd spent more time with my family and loved them and done all those things, right? And maybe some people, like, if I just had more opportunity and means, I would have been able to do that or something. But very few people, I think, go back and say, I wish I'd 10x'd my productivity, right? No, I don't think anybody comes
Yeah.
back on their deathbed. They're probably like, I'm on my deathbed because I 10x'd my productivity about 3
Yeah.
years ago, and that's why I'm freaking here. It's like,
Yeah. Well, I
so
think there might be some sort of like a Laffer curve where, there's an optimal time, like I think about when I optimize my morning, that
yeah,
involves stress work, right? That
yeah,
involves breathing and muscle tension
hmm
and push-ups and doing unpleasant things with my body that I would in that moment prefer not to do. There's also
yeah,
for a lot of listeners to this podcast, it would be getting up early and prepping meals so that they're not
mm,
subject to the whims of urges later in the day, but they have to like, okay, here's my meal ready. When I'm hungry, I can just go eat it. It's as easy as a microwave pizza.
Yeah.
I think
Mm.
I think maybe the problem is that most of us, especially during this pandemic, have shifted way over to the left of the bottom of the bell curve, where, like, for me, a lot of
Mm.
my morning routines kind of went to shit.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so there was some part of me that's like, you've got to hold on militantly to your
Mm.
bucket. Or when the
Yeah.
bucket kind of went away, it was at least like at least 2 minutes of cold shower,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't see anything wrong with maintaining routines. I mean, I did it, right. I did, for the whole while the pandemic was rife. Not that it's completely gone, but it's edging towards endemic now. It really is. Um, but I did 300 odd days of daily breath work at 6 in the morning, so that everybody could like. Never used to film my own breath work every day. I would just get up and do it, right? But I did it for like a year and a half, so that people could anchor to that routine and keep doing it. Um, and I kept dousing, and now I have my routines as well. I get up, I douse, I do some breath work. I spend 10 minutes reflecting. I plan out my day, and then I get on with things. And I don't think there's anything. And I think if you've lost those little things that are very helpful to you, that help you to stabilize, right, and give you a nice platform to move on from things rather than get sucked into, I don't know, TV or Facebooking or something early in the morning and never get started with work or something, then I think, yeah, you should probably find your way back to those and see what you can do. But I think that you're right that there is a point of diminishing returns, right? Optimization by definition can never end, right? It's a process that tends and asymptotically, right? It tends to infinity. Like
Yeah,
you can never optimize to 100%. You just keep optimizing constantly closer and closer. And maybe 75% optimized life is absolutely fine.
optimized.
And that any past that, you just become a boring monk, like that nobody wants to know, right? So maybe we should spread our efforts a little bit more and distribute our attention and say, okay, I think I've optimized as far as is useful in that aspect of my life. And yeah, I could meditate for 3 hours every day. And yeah, I could do yoga for 2.5 hours. And yes, I could plan every single meal I ever eat and count every single calorie, but life wouldn't be worth living while I was doing that. It would be the most boring
Mhm.
experience because everything would be pre planned. And it's worth the trade off to have a little bit of variety in my life and do some other things. And I think, for a systema analogy, for the martial art that I do and that I teach, I've during that whole period where we couldn't physically push and pull each other around as readily as we could, right? We found small opportunities to train and things like that. I went, as a lot of people did, very internal and just started to look at very simple things like where you put your attention when you're doing a push up. Like, can you put your attention in your elbows or can you put it in your fingertips? And how does that change the process of you doing this? And can you kind of, by shifting where your attention lies in a similar way that meditation will give you kind of that focus, that ability to focus inside or outside your body, can you kind of distribute your attention more freely, and have it grabbed less by like impacts or
Mm.
sudden shocks in life, to the extent that you can kind of sail through life a little bit better, right? And in martial arts, that ability to have kind of no mind, that ability to clean the slate and sit in a place where you're not thinking too much about yourself, you're not thinking too much about what needs to be done, like I need to deal with this attack, but you're just floating in that place where you're comfortable, right? You're just like, yeah, things are happening, and here, not even here I am, it's like here we are, right? The
Mm.
whole situation is like, I'm here, you're over there, there's an environment around us, and this is a situation, and your mind is on the situation and not on yourself and what you feel about it, or not on the other person and what they want to do, right? It's there. And I think the more I understand that, the more that I practice that in martial arts, the more I'm like, oh, this is something that's been missing from my life enormously, right? This is, even though I carry the physical skills from life into from martial arts into daily life, and I've carried to some extent the ability to kind of stress proof yourself, to do breath work and control your body, and to mitigate the effects and symptoms of stress on yourself. That higher order ability to shift your entire focus, to shift the entire set of things that you're looking at, and then become more unperturbable, right?
Mm.
I think that's the skill that probably we need right now, right? It's not a million, it's not 50 ways or 20 books that are going to help you to produce more. I just think that we need better skills at at sitting back, looking at the whole situation and discerning what's important, and then having the ability to go forward with that, right? Rather than go through cycles of laser focused concentration, exhaustion, and then extended recovery and seeking dopamine, right? Which is, I
Mm.
think, what people have just been riding that dopamine roller coaster for 2 years, and they're having trouble coming out of that. They want the reward behaviors. They feel like they deserve a beer at the end of every day and a snack every time they reach out. And now they're going back to work, and nobody's patting them on the head for just existing anymore. Right now, we have to wean ourselves off of that dopamine teat and then start to come back to a place where we can see what's there and what needs to be done and get on with it. I think that's what we need right now. That's my
Mm.
intuition.
So I'm really struck by the word sort of unperturbable versus undistractable. And
Yeah.
I'm curious if you could dive into the differences a little more.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably to, if one of the things that's some of the advice that's offered to being indistractable, right? Let's take a case study for this, is to set yourself off in a chamber, right? One part of this is like the deep work Cal Newport thing, right? Just set yourself away and make yourself indistractable by just blocking out time when you refuse to pay attention to anything outside of that remit and outside of that space, right? You're just going to read for 3 hours, you're going to write for 3 hours, you're going to crank out whatever it is that you have to do in that 3 hours, and you switch off all of your phone notifications and you shut down all the things, and you go to a log cabin in the Trossachs somewhere or something. I don't know, right? But you do all the things to shut out any possible input from anywhere else, right? And that's how you train yourself in theory to get the stuff done, right? That's the tactic for indistractability. But to me, that's not becoming indistractable. That's just putting yourself in a different place where there aren't distractions. And there's a big difference between those two things. That's
Mm.
not training you how to handle distractions and filter. That's training you to run away from them and only to be able to concentrate when you're in a silo, right? It's the same
Mm.
thing as when you have to, if you're going to sleep and you have to have like a noise machine and the plugs and the face mask and the patchouli oil and the whale music, right? If that's the only way you can go to sleep, then you can't sleep most of the time. If anybody, one siren goes off or the batteries go out on your noise machine or something else happens, there's a power cut, then you're awake again because you're crap at sleeping, right? Somebody who's really good at sleeping can sleep through a siren and an earthquake, right? Or something like that, or maybe not that much. Actually, that's probably a good analogy. You do want to be able to hear the inputs and wake up, right? When I sleep, I can't sleep with a noise machine in the room because I'm like, well, what if somebody breaks in? I need to be able to hear the backdrop of what's going on so I can
Mm.
get downstairs and protect my kids. I don't want to be in a cocoon upstairs while whoever's sneaking around in my house or something, right? So I don't feel comfortable with that. I'd rather sleep on the floor downstairs with all my senses available to me. But I sleep hard, right? I sleep well. I don't have
Mm.
trouble getting to sleep. And there, I think, lies the difference between indistractable and imperturbable, right? Like indistractable, you you're trying to deny yourself the inputs most of the time with the tactics that people have. But if you're imperturbable, you allow the inputs to come in, but you train yourself to process them in a way that it doesn't affect you on the deep nervous system level, right? You're like, yep, I noticed that and I'm going to do nothing about it. It's not steering my behavior in a strong way.
Mm. Yeah, although I mean, there's certain elements of the indistractable in terms of like there are um, attention sucks that are very, like the social media things, like the phone in
Yeah,
particular. And this as well as anyone, you've created tech proof, right?
yeah.
So
Mm.
it's not like, like I'm just going to keep my phone here all the time, and like
Train myself to
maybe I
ignore
should
it.
maybe I should turn it off right now,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to looking at it. But but I do love this idea of like we're building internal capacity to face the world rather than putting demands on the world or on our ability to filter it. It reminds me very much of conversations we've had about, type 2 diabetes and glucose,
Mm.
um, and people who have gut sensitivities to foods, and their response is to never have those foods again, rather than to train their guts to be able to handle it. Or
Yeah,
um,
yeah, I see. Yeah, there's a sense in which you've got to be able to learn to tolerate the real world and its varieties and vagaries. I think and I think if your response to stress is to hide from it, and your response to potential distraction stopping you from producing things is to hide from anything that might distract you, right? Then you lose the benefits of, I don't know, collaborating with teams in real time. You lose the benefits of that random bit of input that you might have got at some point during the day, which really might have made a difference or even sped up what it is that you're doing. Like more than once over the past few months working for this, this company that I'm working for now, I've done that. I've switched off all of my email notifications, right, in order to get some deep work done, like to design some PowerPoint slides about a deep concept in science or something like that, right? And I've shut them down for like 3 hours or something. And I've like cranked out and I've done a bunch of stuff. And then I'm like, great, I did it, right? I've got this slide, I've got this piece of content, I've got something that I've written. I'm really quite proud of it. I'm like, look at me, I did my deep work and I cranked it out. And then I, reactivate my notifications again, and there's 12 emails, two of which might have enabled me to do that thing in about a third of the time. If I just read that email half an hour after I shut off all my email notifications, they would have been like, oh, hey, we got some new data in on here, and this might be a really good way to represent it. I'll be like, I struggled with that for 2 hours because I shut down the expert who could have told me how to do that even better, right? So I missed that opportunity because I refused to acknowledge inputs because I was so scared of getting distracted, right? And that's just one example,
Right. And so then
I think so.
the
I think there has
question
to be a
there is,
balance struck.
what
Yeah.
what do you do? What do you do with the other 10? Right? Like,
The other
can
10
you
what?
the other 10 emails? You said you got a dozen. Two of them could have really
Yeah.
helped you. Presumably, the other
Yeah.
10 were going to be distractions of some kind. And
Mm.
the Tim Ferrisses of the world will tell you to turn off your email because once you keep getting pinged by it,
Yeah.
right, then you have this, no such thing as multitasking. You're just attention switching, and it's got all these costs associated with it.
Sure.
As I'm listening to you now, I'm thinking that maybe attention switching, while it's costly, isn't prohibitively costly in some
I,
situations.
yeah, I think it probably is, but I think there's probably a balance to be struck again between shutting yourself off entirely, and maybe some aspects sometimes when you've got to crank something out, let's say you feel like you have all the information that's necessary, right? You're not making any assumptions, you have all the verifiable facts you need to produce something, right? You don't need input from anybody else at this juncture, and it's just going to take you 3 hours to organize all of this stuff and turn it into a piece of work, right? If that's the case, you should shut everything off and go Cal Newport it and go deep work and write the thing, right? But if there's anything floating around, if there's any kind of group input that you need, or there's something else that you haven't taken account for right now, and that might be necessary, then maybe shutting yourself off for just an hour at a time do you know what I mean, is more valuable. And maybe you need a system for triaging the emails such that you ignore everything unless it's from the 3 people, from the CEO or from the 2 people on the team that you're actually connected to this project. Do you know what I mean? So some way of like tagging things, so you could say, okay, if it's relevant, then this email gets through. If it's not, I'm not even going to look at it right now. There is a problem to the ping pong thing, right? Just to distract the alert and the notification coming up. Like, I just switch those off a lot of the time anyway, right? But maybe instead of trying to batch your emails twice a day or something like Tim Ferriss would recommend, right? Maybe it's more realistic sometimes to say, let's do this every hour and a half or every 2 hours and just not have notifications in between. And then at least at a quick scan, you could be like, okay, 6 emails there, 12 emails there, none of them are relevant to this project. I'm going to get back to that later on. And that's hard to do. And the tendency is to be like, well, I can just take care of this now. And you can derail yourself. And there is a cost to attention switching, I think. So I'm not advocating throwing all that stuff out. But I think what I'm saying is, again, it's that 75% rule. It's like, when have you optimized that enough to be like, okay, I'm indistractable enough right now, right? I'm not checking social media. I've silenced my notifications for a little bit, but I need to leave some of this door open, both so that I don't cut off opportunities, and also so that I can train myself to work in the face of that. Do you know what I mean? Like to work adaptively and to work quickly without getting drawn into something and drawn out. I think there's a skill to be had there as well.
Yeah. Well, when you came and worked with the coaches at the retreat, and the final thing you taught was this sort of global attention, very sort of
Yeah.
diffuse attention on all the senses, on everything that's happening, not just focusing on one thing. That's part of imperturbability, is the ability to pull back from getting hooked. That, okay, I've just gotten this email, It
Yeah.
looks interesting. It looks like it'd be
Mm.
fun or urgent or something, but it's not in the purview of what I'm working on right now. And I don't have to block it out. And there's part of me that I have an expansive enough attention that I
Yeah.
can make that value judgment and that decision in the moment. And I don't need to make it in advance preemptively.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just it, and it's like coming back to the context of, if it's like a physical altercation and something's going on, the difficulty in that, once you know how to move your arms and legs and you're not terrified of getting thrown over or punched or something like that, the difficulty comes in that how quickly your attention can get hooked, right? You can practice in such a way for like many years, like they do in Tai Chi sometimes, where there's just nobody else involved, right? And you focus like intimately on keeping your attention exactly where you want it to be and moving your hands and feet. As soon as somebody else is involved and is pushing and pulling, as long as you're doing well, as long as you feel like you're riding that flow state and everything feels easy, it's still fairly easy to keep your attention where you want it to be. It's only when you start, something changes abruptly, right? And something happens that you don't want to happen, that your attention gets hooked, and then it becomes kind of a slope, like it collapses from underneath you. And you can't stop thinking about the fact that you're losing, or you can't stop thinking about the fact that things aren't going the way that they want to. And then inevitably you tumble down there, and training the skill to be able to be like, oh, he's got my arm. I don't care. It's only an arm. And then you kind of come out of that and then counterattack from that position. And then even before that, like the real mastery comes, I think, in before anything's even happened, just finding that complete equanimity of being like, it doesn't matter what happens. Whatever happens, my body and my mind will take care of it, right? And having no expectations of the outcome at all. And just really finding that place where whether you get pushed or pulled, no matter what people try to do to focus your attention and pull it from the environment around you where you might find good decisions to be made, one of which might be run away or get out that door or something, right? Getting pulled down to like, I have to stay here and fight, or I have to defend my leg, or whatever it's going to be, right? If you have that ability to see the bigger picture, you're always an advantage to somebody else because they're hyper focused and you're not. And that's what it feels like when you work with Vladimir or any of the absolute masters, is that they are unperturbable. It's not just that you can't hurt them by hitting them because they can distribute the impact like physically right that way. It's that they're psychologically unperturbable because they're looking at the bigger picture. They're solving a different problem to you, right?
Mm.
You're solving a very short-term problem. We're like, you're trying to act like American senators or something. You're only focused on the next 6 months and whether or not you're going to get elected, right? And they're playing like the 90-year long game of some Scandinavian country making a policy, right? They're just like, well, he might try and kind of take me down right now, but I can see 50 things that he's doing wrong. I can see a wall next to him. I can pull on his shoelace and he'll fall over, right? And we miss all those details because we're so intent on defending ourselves or one little thing. And where your attention goes, your physical attention follows, right? And I think the same thing is true in daily working life, right? Is that you might start the day with equanimity and you finished your meditation and you've done whatever it is that you do to make yourself feel good. And maybe you did your 5 a.m. club and did all your routine. But if something throws you a curve in the middle of the day, right, you get like that unwelcome email or that fast, urgent response or maybe family life intercedes, right? One of your kids is sick and you have to take them to the hospital or something else happens, right? And everything gets thrown up and you're still required to kind of deliver on all these fronts, right? It's how quickly can you reestablish that balance is a skill, right? And pull yourself back and be like, okay, there's something to do, but this is not the end of the world. What's first? What's next? What's next? What's next? And get on with that way. And that's not a function of indistractability at all. That's a function of adaptability, right? That's the better yardstick to measure our ability to survive in the world. Is how adaptable are we, not how indistractable are we, right? How can we just kind of keep that center in the middle of all the chaos and then come back to it?
Mm. So what are the practices, if we're getting back to our morning, to our optimized morning, it seems like one of the
Yeah.
things you're saying is like less rather than more. We don't need to, we have, all of us has, each of us has, all of us have your, the government
Don't ask
is,
me.
the
I'm only
government
British. I
are,
only
I don't
speak
know.
English. Yeah. All of us have, I think. Yeah.
Uh, um, like
Every one of us has, or all of us have. I think that's the way it goes.
innate tools that are
Mm.
that we block right through excess tension, through getting hooked. but like one of the things I was thinking when I was on the ground doing the breathing exercises that you shared a couple of weeks ago was, boy, this would be more useful to me than my morning meditation, right? And I've
Yeah.
been meditating every day for 20 minutes, just sort of sitting,
Yeah.
sort of classic meditation,
Mm.
just noticing the air going in and out of my nostrils, a little
Mm.
mantra, ahum, and when I
Yeah.
get distracted, bring it back. And I've really cherished that I've done this twice a day since April 2019. So this is
Mm.
so 3 years now. And so part of me lives in terror of ever missing it because there's a
Mm.
narrative like, oh, well,
Mm.
that's done. That was a nice run.
Yeah.
And then there's also part of me is
Mm.
like when I'm lying down and I'm doing the system of breath work or I'm massaging my belly, like, maybe I could cheat during the meditation and do a little breath work during the meditation. Is that all right? You know, like
Mm.
there's some objective arbiter that's not
Mm.
me out there and that I have to kind of, right. And there's a feeling like what I'm missing is a kind of freedom or agency to make
Mm.
my own decisions about this. Like I want you to tell me that this would be better
Yeah.
for me than the other thing. I can feel that impulse. Like I need an authority to make me change this so it doesn't all go to shit.
Yeah, which brings us back to the list of 15 books to tell you how to optimize your life, right? Like you don't know and that you can't trust yourself to figure that out, and that you need 15 self-help authors to try and help you figure it out. It's the same problem, isn't it? I think. Um, I mean, I think it's really important just kind of to acknowledge what it is that we're saying or that with our actions, right, that we're doing. So that example there, you said that you've been doing for 3 years, you've been meditating every day, and that you fear what would happen if you didn't, like a lot of times. So there's like a loss aversion that's tied up into that. Do you know what I mean? You feel like, oh, if I give up on this, then I mark myself out as the sort of person that gives up on meditation after a little while. Or maybe all the benefit, maybe I feel pretty distractible right now, but I can't imagine how much more distractible I would have been if I hadn't been doing this for
Yeah.
3 years.
Or
There's that fear is there.
and to be honest, there's a lot of ego. Like I'm really fucking proud of the fact that I've been meditating every day, twice a day for 3 years. And I kind of want, I'll sort
Mm,
of toss it in gently in conversation as if it's no big deal. But I'm like
yeah, but
that gives
it's a
me
big deal to you.
cachet,
Yeah.
and I don't want to lose
Yeah.
that either.
Yeah. Okay. So so yeah, I've been doing this really interesting training thing as well with one of the guys that I met off the podcast, or was introduced to by one of him. So there's a guy in the UK who runs this company, based on kind of analyzing behaviors, looking at reasons for behavior, and then going to organizations to help them to unpack the kinds of things that are going on in their organizations and why people are making bad decisions, right? So it's basically kind of like the science of good decision making.
Mm.
And one of the aspects of this is this exercise called Assumptions Challenge. Have you ever heard of this before?
No.
It's part of the process of red teaming that military groups do in order to try and, right before they're about to implement a plan that everybody agrees is the best plan and all the best people have put together, and they're about to do it right on the eve of that. Then they have a practice of like one guy or one team within the whole unit is tasked with red teaming the decision. It's just like, okay, let's just say that I think the plan is complete crap. Here's all the reasons why it's going to fail, right? Despite the fact that everybody thinks it's a good idea, right? And one of the key exercises within this is the assumptions challenge. So you write down a big list of all the things that you think you know about the situation, right? That's implied by your plan, right? So let's do this really quick, right? So I think this might be a fun exercise to try,
Okay.
just for the sake of this, right? So you're trying to make a decision about how to optimize your life, right? Give me 5 or 6 statements about that whole situation, things that you believe you know. Right?
Okay. So one of the most
And
important things is that I have lots of energy.
okay, it's important to have lots of energy. That's one, right?
Right.
Another statement. Go. Let's just fire off 6 or 7.
That my mood frequently determines the outcomes I go for.
Mood determines outcome. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, the cleaner I eat, the more focus and energy I have for being productive.
Okay. For productivity. Okay. Yeah.
Right?
That's 3.
Um, Routines are very important.
Routines are important. Okay.
And
Go again.
the thing that'll probably make the biggest difference in whether I do stuff or not is the environment.
Biggest difference. Okay, cool. Actually, I need to backtrack from this one little bit and ask another fundamental question, right? So, what's the problem that you're trying to solve with this,
Yeah.
with
Well,
optimizing
so
your
you
morning
know,
routine?
the question I'm trying to answer is like, what's the ideal more like morning, let's say morning routine to set me up for a great day? Because
Okay, now rephrase that in terms of what's the problem you're trying to solve, because that's not a problem, right?
okay,
That's what's the problem you're trying to solve with this, with actually attempting it in the first place?
how to not have a shit day.
And what do you mean by a shit day?
A day in which I don't feel good and I don't produce anything of value and I don't necessarily live my values and I don't move towards important outcomes.
And do you feel like that happens a lot?
Too much.
Too much. Okay, so you would like to make shit unproductive days less frequent. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
sure.
Okay, yeah. So if that's the problem, I'm not saying that's necessarily yours, but this would be one reason why you might want to do it. But it's important to ask that question. The second question is this the right problem to be working on right now? Of all the things that you could be thinking about and working on, is I want to have fewer shitty unproductive days the problem to be working on
Yeah.
right now?
Funny you should ask, because I had a conversation with Mia at lunch where I was talking about, I was going to get up this morning and work out, but it was raining, so I wasn't going to run. So then I was going to go to my office and do yoga and lift weights. And then I just didn't feel up to it. And I feel kind of bad for not feeling up to it. And she said, you haven't had a day off in over a month, right? Because the retreat was 2 weekends in which I was
Yeah.
totally on. Last weekend, I was playing in an ultimate frisbee tournament in New Orleans. She's like, maybe the problem is you're just really fucking tired.
Yeah. Yeah. So the problem might be that you're not productive enough, or the problem might be that you've been trying so hard to be productive, you didn't allow yourself sufficient recovery time, and you've just generally just kind of run yourself down to the point where you can't concentrate, and it makes having a shit day more likely, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's true, but that's another possibility, right? Another problem that you could work on is like, how do I make myself rest, right? That might be another problem that you might be think about working right now, as opposed to how do I stop having non-productive days, right? One of those might solve the other one.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, in fact,
I mean? Like, if you got one,
when you juxtapose them, you had to pull the problem of unproductive days out of me. What the problem I was trying to solve is, how do I get up early in the morning to have a really productive routine versus can I just sleep in for a week or two and start recovering? Like there's no trust. I will say there's no trust. Like if I just don't do anything, morally, you know, virtuous for myself for 2 weeks and I just rest, there's a story that I've just turned into a lazy turd, and it's downhill from here. And there's no trust that my body at some point will say, okay, now it's time to have a really hard workout.
So there's a third problem to be solved. How do I trust myself not to turn into a lazy turd if I skip a day of meditation or sleep in one day?
Yeah.
Right? Is that another problem?
That's there too.
Okay. So with that in mind, right? What happens if you succeed at solving this problem? Right. So let's say problem number 1, how to not have a crap day and you're super productive every single day. What happens if you win at that thing and you have the most optimized day ever every single day, and you're super productive every single day? What happens? What's the outcome of that?
So one outcome is things I care about move forward in the world. So
okay.
Some of my work makes the world a better place.
Okay.
And that, there, if you wanted more assumptions, there's one of my assumptions, right?
Okay. Yeah, that it's going to make that big a difference. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so that might be what the effect on the wider environment, right? Whether or
Right.
not that's true or not, that's one thing, and that's what's driving you. What effect would it actually have on you as an
Right.
individual?
Well, so presumably my finances improve because I'm not on salary. I I freelance,
Okay.
and so
Hmm.
if I'm doing the work, then I'm setting myself up for an easier, more abundant next few months.
Okay.
Right.
And what effect would that have on your home life, on the people immediately around you, right?
Um,
So on Mia, on the kids, like if you were super productive, I get up early and work all day guy, what effect's that going to have on your family, for example, if you
um,
succeed in being super
yeah.
productive?
Well, I think I'm more stable emotionally when I have this sort of gyroscope of work and achievement. So I'm less
Mm,
likely to be drawn in and blindsided if there's arguments and unpleasantness. That there's a way that me feeling like I'm doing good in this sphere is sort of
mm,
strengthens me and allows me to put the other stuff in perspective. It's not it's easy for me if I'm just sort of lying around and people are unhappy with each other
mm.
in the family to kind of really fetalize, at
Okay.
least spiritually, like this is
Okay.
all
Cool.
there is, as opposed to what,
Yeah.
I'm also doing all this other stuff, and so this is a part of what is.
Okay. Gotcha. So that's interesting. So there's like, when you look at the whole reason for even thinking about the problem, like why this and why now, you're like, I don't want to have crap unproductive days. And then when I ask why and the effects it can have, you say that, well, if I have more productive days, I will earn more money and then I will feel more stable. And I'll also feel like that I have achievements that lie beyond what's going on at home. And so when I'm more productive and I'm achieving more things, I'm happier. And that will have a better knock on effect on the family around me and all that kind of stuff as well. Um, and and then you also have the other things that you were talking about, which is routines are important. If I eat properly, if I eat cleaner, then I'll have a more stable mood. And if I have a stable mood, that has a better effect on the outcome, right? So some of those things, right? So as you go through those list of things that you've said, as you kind of talk to yourself about why you're doing this, right? Some of those things are kind of verifiable facts in the sense that you could prove them or disprove them. Do you know what I mean? In the sense of like scientific facts, right? It's not to say that you could ever prove them 100% laws or truths forever, right? But you could absolutely prove yourself wrong by saying by saying like, well, I ate really crappy food today and I feel actually quite great and I have plenty of energy, right? If that were true, then you could disprove that thesis about eating clean gives me good energy and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
But to at least insofar as you know, right, those things that you said, that mood affects outcome, eating clean gives me more focus and energy during the day. Um, those things to you are verifiable facts and you've proven them to yourself, like with beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Those things. But in and amongst there are other things which are assumptions, right? Which are stated straight up assumptions, which are if I'm more productive, I will earn more money, right? I don't know that's necessarily true, especially as an author, right? You can write for years and years and years and write pages and books of material, and it doesn't necessarily translate into getting paid more, right? It depends. It really depends on what things are picked up. You could make a million podcasts, and unless you're getting paid per podcast, which I'm pretty sure you're not, right? That extra productivity doesn't translate into extra money that way. So in a wide range of circumstances, that's an assumption that it's not true. I'm not saying it's not true now, but I'm saying that it's not a verifiable fact for you. Do you know what I mean? There's an assumption in there that if only you were way more productive, you would earn way more money. And then those other contingent things like, and with more money, I'd feel more secure. Those kinds of things aren't necessarily true, right?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. And again, it's all contingent. Like there's some work I do on an hourly basis. Like if I do an hour's work, I get money for that hour. So in that case, like
Okay.
prioritizing it
Yeah.
does lead to financial security. There's other things that I do on spec. Absolutely. There's things that I do that aren't
Yeah.
financially motivated at all. Typically,
Mm.
in my career, those are the ones that have been the most lucrative in roundabout ways when I'm not trying to make money. is when,
Yeah.
when I like, write a book review on Amazon, and then the author contacts me and we write a book
Hmm.
together. like,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
So yeah, so there's absolutely a very sort of serendipitous relationship between useful things I do and income.
Okay. You feel those between useful things, but then that begs the question of which of the things that you do are useful, and how good a judge are you of the things that you should be spending time on. So what I'm saying is that if the initial question was how do I not have a crappy day and get up early and do a bunch of things and be more productive, right? You could do a whole bunch of things. You could work all day long on things that at the end turned out to be not productive, and then you won't feel good about them at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? That you did so many things and you stayed busy for hours and hours on end, but none of those things seem to move the needle at all in the world, in the things that make a difference to you. You know, that's completely possible that might happen. You might optimize your Tim Ferriss day, get up, meditate, eat clean, work out, be ready to do all the things, and then work all day on things that don't matter. That's possible, right?
Right.
It's possible. I'm not saying that you do. I'm just saying that it's a possible thing for that to happen, right?
Sure.
So is that on the flip side, if you knew all of the things that were 100% necessary for you to be super productive to get the other things that you feel like would move the needle on things that matter to you, right? You might not need to get up at 5 a.m. and do all those things, right? If you absolutely knew, if you had a crystal ball and you could tell what was going to be the most productive and give you the most leverage, then you wouldn't need to be Mr. Super Productive, right? So in a sense, the assumption is that you need to spread bet, right? You don't know what's going to come up roses, so that you have to find a way of staying super productive so that 10% of what you do, and you don't know what that 10% is going to be, right, is going to be the thing that leverages things. And if you don't spend 8 to 10 hours a day doing that, if you only spend 4 hours a day doing that, or you don't get started for a few hours because you have a lazy morning, then you're only spending 10 minutes on the things that matter. And that's only like enough to move the needle this much. And you're probably not going to get there. Is that kind of fair to say?
Right. So as I'm hearing you, there's definitely sort of an 80-20 to it.
Yeah,
And I don't think it's as random as you made it out to be. Which
sure.
comes back to, what you're talking about, is to adaptability and ability to feel the moment. Like
Yeah.
like there, the most, let's just take financially, the most
Mm,
lucrative hours or minutes of my life have been minutes,
mm,
right? In
yeah.
terms of, oh, here's an idea, or here's a phone call I'm going to make, or here's a
Yeah.
proposal I'm going to put together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the things that have really led to the significant income that I've made when I've made it.
Mm,
There's been, sort of follow up work, but there's a lot of $10 an hour work that I do, a lot of fifty
mm,
dollar an hour work, a bunch of $100 an hour work, and there have been $10,000 an hour hours,
yeah. Right.
and
Yeah. So,
yeah, and I'm better at identifying them than
mm,
I think. When
right.
when I can be sort of present and, unperturbable.
Okay. So then this kind of narrows down the question a little bit, right? The goal. So if you're like, well, how do your quandary really was like, you want to be able to build this routine or kind of get into a place where you don't have crappy non-productive days, but you're waiting for an expert or an authority to tell you what that routine is,
Yeah.
right? But I would suggest to you that you know exactly what that routine is. You know exactly what the things are that are important for you to focus on, right? You have a really good idea of the kinds of things that lead to the $10,000 days, 10,000 days or whatever they're going to be, right? And so your daily routine should be minimal enough to kind of get you into that space where you're kind of relaxed, you feel healthy enough to do what you're going to do, but healthy enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not so that you're spending 2 hours at the beginning of the day working out, meditating, doing all the things, and then you'll get around to starting work a little bit later. But there's like a minimum effective dose. You'll get up, do a little bit of breath work. Maybe you meditate, maybe you don't. If that's important to you, then great. If it's serving your purposes, then great. But if it's not, it's 20 minutes that's getting in the way of other things that you could have been doing,
Mm.
right? Not depending on whether or not it's serving your purposes. And probably more important than anything else is for you to 80-20 the crap out of everything as soon as you get up, right? Because the most important thing that you need to do every day is identify what that 10 to 20% is before you even start working. Because otherwise, you could be super motivated, super clear, super energized and just work all day long on the other 80% and make more and more time for that, and then be demotivated when you see the results of that aren't coming off the way that want to, and that could lead you down the wrong hole. So from a behavioral perspective, you've created your ideal routine, you're cranking it out every day, you've stuck to it, you're meditating, you're eating clean, you're doing all the things, but the response is nothing different. You're like, I'm making the same money, I'm on the same hamster wheel, and nothing is going great. So probably the way that you reinforce the behavior of having a morning routine, which you feel is working, is consistently focusing on things that give you a good and immediate response. Do you know what I mean? So that you trick your body into being like, yeah, we do need to get up, because it really does make a difference on those days when we get up, and that we plan what we're going to spend our time on, right? So meditation is less important than really focusing on the 2 or 3 things that need to be done today, and maybe even working out and all of those things is secondary, or working out for an hour is secondary to just working out a little bit and enough to get your brain going, and then getting into things, and then you can complete working out later on, because it's not a difficult activity, right? It's something you can do in the afternoon when you're in your post-lunch slump, in a way that some of the other difficult work can't be done in the afternoon.
Mm.
You'll just kind of flake out on it, right? And that's, I shift my, once we get off of this, I'm going to do my half an hour of running about, working out, doing my things, right? And I used to do that in the mornings, but I haven't had the luxury of being able to do that since I started this new job in January. And it actually works out better this way, because I was using up a lot of my energy on something that took very little mental focus in a lot of ways. Like, I'm relaxing when I'm working out, I'm relaxing when I'm breathing, I'm spacing out and having a good time. But now instead, I spend half an hour in the morning just kind of getting into the place where I need to be, or sometimes only 15 minutes, right? Where I need to be for work, another 15 minutes of planning or reading, and then I get into my work, I get it all cranked out, and then around about 3 or 4 p.m. I will spend a good hour around that time, right? Doing physical things, which take some degree of focus, but they don't take last minute decision making.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? And like meal prep as well, I make sure that everything's planned out for the week. I'm like, okay, this day I'm going to do some groundwork, this day I'm going to do some bag work, this day I'm going to roll around on the floor, this day I'm going to do some sword, and so I can just look on the thing and be like, oh yeah, that's what I was going to do today. I don't have to make the decision, because otherwise I'll be like, well, do I go for a run, do I do some push-ups, do I do some pull-ups in the rings, do I do some sword? I could just check Facebook first and then see.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's the path at which that's the behavioral equivalent of not meal planning. Do you know what I mean? You just pick up a behavioral pizza at that point and do nothing. So I think probably the ideal routine for you is probably one that does the minimal things enough to get you going, to get you jump started, gives you an immediate focus on the things that you need to get done every single day, and then gets those things a little bit out of the way, make some headway into those things earlier on in the day, and then leave enough space in the rest of the day that you might have those serendipitous contacts, that you might check your Amazon reviews or check your emails or do something like that, and not do the full-on deep work thing and ignore those things. Because if those turn into $10,000 days, then you want to leave the space in there for that to happen, right?
That's awesome.
Like it's a start.
Given,
it's a start.
Yeah, you've given me permission to start giving myself permission.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think we do this enough. I think we're bigger experts in our own lives than almost anybody else, unless we're in a deeply pathological place and we just need somebody else to pull us out of this and slap us around for a little while. But I think a lot of the time we're not at all. We're just we don't trust ourselves, and we just need to give ourselves time to step back and have a look at it and recalibrate. And then often the answers fall into place. It's like having a good night's sleep on it, right? And sometimes the answers suggest themselves.
Yeah. And also I'm thinking, like, there was almost for all of 2021, I was working out 3 times a week in the morning, 7 to 8, because I had a couple of guys on Zoom. We'd work out together. And then in January 2022, they both said, no, I want to do other things. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just keep doing it. And I didn't. And it was really hard to, like, I'd get, I'm going to do, what am I going to do? I'm going to do 10 sets of this. And after 4 sets, I'm like, I didn't feel like doing the 10 sets. It's boring.
It's so boring.
There's nobody to show off in front of, or to impress, or to even
crack jokes with, or whatever.
And like, there was a long period of me being disappointed in myself for not being able to do this thing that was so good for me that I said I wanted to do, when all that changed was there wasn't a computer screen. But it was a big change.
Yeah. And that's it. It comes down to that thing. I don't think you should be be a fanatic about anything, like not even fanatically healthy behaviors. Like you got to allow yourself that kind of, and allow yourself some human kindness, and be like, this is all going to be easier if I ask for help, right? If I'm exercising with somebody else, if somebody else joins me on this plan to eat better, right? If I enlist my family in telling me to shut my laptop down so that we can have family time, like rather than depend on myself to have the discipline to be like, no more work today, bam, right? Get your family to be like, no, we've got a rule. You shut the laptop off after this time and no more work will be done that day, right? It's playtime now. And that's something that I've had to learn over the last few months, right? If there's something that I've learned is that there's a massive value. I always did things like just get outside, get nature, do some breath work, rebalance myself in lots of other ways. But there's an extraordinary value in starting the day and ending the day. Like people always go on about morning routines, right? They go on about you've got to do these things, optimize yourself, get yourself up, get the on ramp going, and then you hit the ground running. Whether it's organize tomorrow today or eat that frog or 80-20 or whatever it's going to be, people are obsessed with the idea of starting the day, right? And yeah, if that's your problem, if you just have a real problem getting up and starting the day, then maybe that's the place to put your focus. What I see is so many people are just incapable of ending the day, right? They get to the end of the working day and there's no transition out of work, right? They stop doing it for a little bit and they have dinner or they'll do something else and then they'll pick up another email and then they do 3 other things and they'll open the laptop and they'll check a few things on their phone. And it's like you never really put it down. And then even when you're going to bed, you never psychologically checked out of work at all. You never punched out at any point. And some people might be like, yeah, that's how you get things done. And that's how you're driven in the world and you move fast and you get stuff done. But it's psychologically damaging. It gives you no capacity for recovery because there could always be something you're listening for and you're always nervous about something that you might miss, right? At any point in there, there has to be a signal that you're done with the day, right? And for me, that will be going for a walk with my family after they get back from school and work and everything else like that. I'm like, okay, they could come back and I could stay on the computer. And sometimes I have meetings at fixed times or something or weird hours with people on the Pacific coast. And I don't have that luxury. But then after that, I try and do something that demarcates the end of the day. It's like a little gap year every single day. Like I'm done learning, I'm taking a gap year and then I'll go back to work tomorrow. It's like that. And you have to do that. Otherwise it never gets put down.
Sorry, I have a call that's coming in. I'm just going to tell them I need I missed.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
No, I just missed. I'll call right back. But
yeah.
So I didn't.
Do you know what I'm talking about with that? Just that necessity of just ending things.
Yeah, I'm just
as you try to end the phone call.
Yeah. Well, as I try to I'm realizing, I had a call scheduled at 4, and here we are at 4, and you're talking, and I don't want to be rude, and I'm like, I wish there were 2 of me. One could go out and take this call, and
yeah. Well, anyway, I think that probably brings us to a good point anyway, like in that. But yeah, I guess a few things for us both to think about as we come off of this today.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for helping me rethink the morning routine. I'm gonna be more flexible with it and see what happens. I love the minimum dose because I definitely have been front loading physical exercise and then just having been too tired throughout the day. So
yeah. And with that, I'm going to go and exercise.
Oh, nice. So with that, I'm going to take a phone call and exercise later.
Cool.
So,
well, thanks, Howard.
Thank you, Glenn.
It's nice to see you again.
Bye.
Take care.